Today, we're replacing a cooling unit system on a Dometic 6 cubic foot RV refrigerator. Our model number, ARC-LW D61, adapts to Dometic fridge models, RM760, an RM761, and an RM763. So let's get started. Today we're going to get started changing our cooling unit in our refrigerator. There are tools we're going to require to do the job, and here are the tools required. You're going to need a ball peen hammer, a can of any type of penetrating fluid you have on hand. Your cooling unit will come with a set of new screws and washers to install it with, a cordless drill, a 90-degree angle screwdriver, a Phillips bit or Phillips screwdriver, a 5/16 driver bit, this is called, a small pair of needle nose pliers, small crescent wrench, a side cutter pliers, needle nose pliers, a small level, a putty knife, a X-Acto knife. This is the tube of thermal mastic that will come with your cooling unit. A 7-inch 2x4, a 4.5-inch 1x3, a roll of electrical tape, a large crescent wrench, and of course a caulking gun for the thermal mastic. So those are the things that will be required to do the job on your fridge. The first thing you're going to do to start your cooling removal is, if your refrigerator has handles, you're going to remove the handles so they're not broken during the process. There are 2 Phillips screws holding each handle, and all you have to do is take both those screws out, take your handles off, and put them aside in a collection box with all your other parts. Now that you've removed the handles from your refrigerator, you're going to open the freezer section. You're going to see 7 screws and washers. You're going to remove those 7 screws and washers with your 5/16 driver. Now that we've removed the freezer screws and washers, our third step will be, we're going to remove the temperature sensor on the cooling fins inside the refrigerator. Just put it aside down the bottom like so. Then you're going to remove this upper shelf that's in the refrigerator. And to do it, you're going to remove both these clips by squeezing them upwards and apart, and they're going to pop right off of that rack. So you're going to take those 2 out of the way. Then with those removed, you'll be able to pull back on these plastic washers, and it'll give you the clearance to pull the unit out of the way. So you're just going to fiddle that out and bring it out of the refrigerator, out of your way. That's your step. Now that we've removed the temperature sensor on the cooling fins and removed the shelf to get it out of our way, our fourth step will be, there'll be 4 5/16 screws in the fins that will have to be removed. We'll take our 5/16 nut driver and we're going to remove those 4 screws. After you've loosened off the 4 bolts in the fin system with your driver, here's a little tip. Just reach in with a pair of needle nose pliers and grab the bolts and pull them out with the needle nose. That way there, you're not reaching in and it's a hard time to do with your hand. So use your needle nose to get them. Now, after we've removed the bolts with our trusty needle nose, this tool here, I made it. It's just a standard screwdriver, and I bent the screwdriver to a 90-degree angle. I'm going to use this screwdriver because it's a handy little tip. You're going to reach in between your fins, and you'll see some plastic in the back at the bottom of your fins. You're going to pry away that plastic gently away from the fins themselves. So just work at it, make sure you've got the plastic loose from the fins. Okay? And then that's good. Now that we've completed removing prying the plastic away from the fins, step 6 will be, we're going to close the refrigerator doors, and carefully holding the doors closed, you're going to bring the fridge down on the front of itself to the ground. And If you require some help doing this, get a friend of yours to help you because it is somewhat heavy. Now that the fridge is down, step 7 will be, look at the cooling unit on the edge of the railing and you'll see some hold down screws. They'll either be Phillips or 5/16 drivers. You're going to remove those screws from the cooling unit. And there'll be one usually in every corner of the cooling unit. Okay, our next step, step 8, you're going to look at the bottom of the refrigerator here, and I get myself a little stool to sit on because I'm going to be down here a few minutes, easier on the back. We're going to remove this burner from the system. And by doing so, we have a Phillips screwdriver here, Phillips screw here, and we have a horseshoe bracket with 2 Phillips screws here. We're going to remove those 3 screws, and that'll lift up out of the way. Now, we're going to lift this burner and bracket and take it and put it aside over here because the horseshoe bracket and everything's been unhooked. Now, our next step would be 9. We're going to remove these 2 upper support legs screws on the refrigerator. So it allows us to spread open the legs for the next step after that. So just remove your Phillips screws on your legs like so. And by doing that, it allows you to spread the legs on the refrigerator. The next step, we're going to come over here to the control box of the fridge. And we're going to remove this black cover. There is a Phillips screw at the very top of the cover up in there that gets removed. Then you're going to take a screwdriver, flat tip screwdriver, and you're just going to pry on both sides of the cover to remove it. And it comes right off like so. Then you're going to look inside the control box and you're going to see a few things. You're going to see a red wire and you're going to see a second red wire. They're both side by side. You're going to remove those wires by just taking needle nose pliers and pull straight up on the wires, and that one pops off. That wire pops off. So you know the 2 red go to the left terminal here, and if you're not sure, mark it down on a piece of paper to remember. Then you're going to have a couple of connectors to remove. And on the connector, there's little push tabs. By squeezing the connector and lifting up on it, it's going to remove. It's a little 4 or 6 prong connector. There's one out of the way, and the second one 2 prong out of the way. So those are those wires cleared and out of your way. After the 2 red wires have been removed, we're going to look over here, and part of that harness, there's a black ground wire. There's going to be a little 7mm nut here. You're going to take that little nut off and remove that ground wire, allowing the harness to move out of the way. Then you're going to look and see 2 black wires, which are called element heating wires. You're going to pull those 2 black wires off of their terminals with your needle nose pliers. There's 1 and there's 2. The next step, step 11, is going to be removing the electrical control box and burner away from the fridge itself. And by doing that, all you have to do is take these 2 Phillips screws out here of the unit. So I'm going to take them off. Then, by doing that, I'm going to grab the burner and the electrical system and pull it right off the fridge and put it aside. Okay. Now that we remove the electrical box and burner away from the fridge, step 12 will be the wiring harness on the cooling unit will be tie wrapped with plastic tie wraps in several locations on the cooling unit. You're just going to reach in and cut off these tie wraps holding the wiring harness to the refrigerator, and you'll be putting new ones on later. After you remove the tie wraps, you're going to gently pull the wiring that's there out and through the fridge and stick it over here on the side. It'll come out quite easily, and you want to make sure that all that harness and wiring is just sort of out of your way like so. So that now is now out of our way. By the way, the heating element that I removed just a moment earlier, in your cooling unit, it may be rusted and seized in place, and you may not be able to slide it out like this. If it's seized up and rusted, don't worry about it. Leave it there. We're going to remove the cooling unit from the fridge with it still in the cooling unit, and we're going to deal with showing you how to get that out afterwards. Now, the next step, you're going to get a 4x4 piece of metal. It doesn't have to be any thicker than a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch, but 4x4. You're going to take that and place it under the cooling unit coils here, and you're going to slide it all the way under until you know that it's past the head of the unit in here. You don't want it, you want it past that ridge of that backing unit. Then you're going to get yourself a 1x3 piece of wood, like so. I made this myself, and I just happened to mark 2652 on it. It is 7.5 inches long. You're going to take that and slide it in this first rump here, and stand it like this against that plate that you put down in there. And the plate's going to give you a good solid prying surface, so that when we're prying, it's not going to break the foam of the fridge. Then, with that in place, I'm going to take my pry bar, and in your case, you may have a crowbar. Anything you have long to pry with, crowbar works fine. You're going to place your crowbar under this little pipe at the top of the unit. You'll see a pipe here. Get it under there. Get on top of your block of wood here, and I'm going to pry down, and it's going to want to lift the cooling unit away from the fridge. Now, it may take some tries to do this. Some of them will come off very easily. Some of them are stubborn. So just keep working at it. You may have to move the plate a little bit, but just keep prying and working at it. And you pry like that, and you'll see that the cooling unit is now loose away from the fridge itself. It's loose. So at this point, you can stop. Remove your pry bar. Okay. You can get rid of your pieces of wood here, and the plate itself, it can stay down in there. Now that the unit's loose, you can grab it on the coils anywhere here and here, and lift up, and the cooling unit's going to come right off the fridge like that. Now earlier I mentioned to you about the heating element. It could be stuck and seized and rusted in this too. Well, here's a suggestion that I can show you to try to remove it. What I usually do is I take some penetrating oil of your choice, spray the end of the cooling unit with the penetrating oil, like so, letting the oil soak into the tube here some. Now, you could let that oil sit there and penetrate for half an hour or an hour. The longer it's in there, the better it's going to work. After giving it some time to soak, I take a hammer and a punch that will fit in this area, a small pipe or punch of your choice, and I'll put it on the end of it, and I'll whack it at the end of this element, and several hard whacks usually will knock it and free it up so it'll come out of the cooling unit. Now that we've removed the cooling unit from the fridge, and I showed you how to do the element, free up the element. Now, I want you to look at the head of the cooling unit that you removed, and if any of this foam material has remained back in the fridge, chunks of it maybe remaining or broken away, I want you to take a putty knife and remove any of the chunks of foam that may have come off your old cooling unit, because we want this box with no extra foam in here for the new fitting cooling unit. Also, if these fins here happen to have come away with the cooling unit when you lifted it out, just take this and unstick these fins from your old cooling unit and bring them back over and stick them here in your fridge ready for your new cooling unit. By the way, this whole procedure I just showed you, for a novice person or for a technician like myself, I can remove a cooling unit in 10 to 15 minutes. For a novice person working with tools, probably a half an hour, and you could have this cooling unit removed like I've done. So it's not a big deal. Take your time and keep your parts all in one box so they're there for you when you go to put it all back together, and you'll be seeing in the next steps. Installation is pretty well the reversal of the removing the cooling. Now, this is going to be the first step in installing your new cooling unit in your refrigerator. Now, your cooling unit will have been shipped to you with one or the other. A tube of heat-conducting Maztec, like I have here, or it may come with a baggie full of the same material. If you get the baggie full of Maztec, what you're going to do is you're just going to take the baggie that's full, cut the little corner off the edge of the baggie, and you're going to squeeze the putty and spread it down on the pipe just like you would spreading some icing on a cake. Now, I'm going to show you the bead of Maztec required is just a bead like this. See me putting that bead of Maztec on that pipe? That's all that's required. And you cover the whole length of your pipes that are showing. And you just keep going, and you do the whole cooling unit piping system with this thermal Maztec. Doesn't take long, but it's important to have this on there. So there's that pipe nicely covered, and then you just continue on. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you get a little bit off of one spot, no big deal. It's going to get squished down and smushed up in the unit and cover that pipe anyway. So, whether you're using a baggie full of this stuff or the nice caulking gun method what I'm doing, that has just completed Maztecing your unit. So now you're going to take your new cooling unit and you're going to pull it down, put it down into your fridge, place it down in there. Make sure the little rails are back in their spot. See that your 4 corner holes line up properly. And if they do, they're going to be close. Make sure you haven't pinched off any wiring under the railing of the cooling unit itself. And you've already got your heat stack in place. Now what you got to do is put your old heating element back into this new cooling unit. So the way you're going to do that, you're going to look at this heat stack, they call this, and there's a little door here. We call it a element door. You're going to squeeze the tin work. This door is going to flip up. Remove that door. Now you're going to take your element, and inside the foam of the insulation here, you're going to feel 2 little tubes. And I'm feeling one tube, closest one to you with my finger. You're going to take your element and stick it in there and work it back and forth, wiggle it, and slide your new heating element in that tube. Then just sort of tidy up your insulation a little bit around that. Take your door, put it back in place here, and close up your door on the cooling unit, and you'll be all set. That little tab just goes in there and closed up. Okay. Our next thing is our baffle. Remember, we took it out of our old unit. Very important to make sure we replace this baffle into the new unit. You just take it at the pipe. There's only one pipe it slips into. Finesse it into the hole, push it down, and there's a little hole in the end of the pipe here that it clips into and holds it in place. And there it is. That's important to have there. If you don't do that step or forget that step, the cooling unit will not work properly on the propane function. Then we're going to take our 4 hold down screws that we took out earlier, and we're going to bolt the cooling unit back down on the corners. Very easy. Just going to put that in there. Boom, it goes right in place. Make sure we get all 4 corners lined up and in. And so easy. You folks at home or any technicians, after you do a few of these cooling units, look, you'll be doing them in your sleep, no problem. It only took me a short period of time to be able to get very comfortable doing this. So it's not hard once you've done it. So that's your step, getting your unit fastened down to the fridge. Now that you've got your cooling unit back in your fridge and secured all 4 corners bolted down nicely, you're going to take that wiring harness that I showed earlier, and you're just going to bring it up into the cooling unit, along the pipes here, anywhere at all. And these coils, you're going to shove it under these coils and work it through all these little coils, snaking it down in here, because you want this harness to come through anywhere along here, and you want it to come back down here with the rest of the wiring. Then, later on, I'll show you this wiring here, as we did before when we took it out. We'll put some new tie wraps just to hold the wiring in place on the back of the unit. Then, I'm going to get my trusty little chair here. Now's the step of putting the electronics and the wiring back together on this unit. As earlier, our feet were taken off, so we'll get out of the way. So, this control box and the burner, as I showed earlier, we're going to take it and we're going to put it back in the fridge. Now, you'll see on the rail right here, there's a little tab on the cooling unit rail. Well, that accepts this box. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to put that box in there and I'm going to slide that thing right in there, and you'll see how the little tab went over the box here. Now, also, you're going to see the two little holes for the screws to hold this plate down. Now, by chance, let's say there was no two little holes there. Don't worry about that, because what you could do very easily, in this case the holes are there, but if not, all you do, take a self-tapping screw, Phillips screw, and you put it on your drill, and you put it in there and drill it down into place. So by this, I'm just doing this and this, and in this case, of course, the holes are there. So just take this, put our screw back in. All that does is just hold this electrical box there from flopping around. That's all we need on that. Very easy to do. So now, get the second screw in. So easy. This is, of course, our plug-in cord, which we get out of the way for now. Now, our burner box, as we did before. We're going to take it, and if you have to push this stack up a little bit away from the burner bracket, so be it. Push it up out of the way, and you'll see how this will slip right in on the burner. So you go like that, you finesse that in there, and boom, that burner just slid on there. And there's a little hole and screw that we had earlier. Line that up, and we're going to screw that down to hold that. So we'll take our Phillips, put it in our hole, and sink that down. Boom. Doesn't have to be super tight, just snug. Then our U-clips, remember our horseshoe clip here holding the orifice bracket? You can take that, and you can put your other two screws in there, and then your whole burner system is going to be back in place like it should. So here comes the other two screws. Very easy, guys. Alright, it's like a hit and miss. You can't go wrong with this. There's only a couple of holes there. Line it up and drive your screws home, and boom. Okay? Automatically it's got itself lined up. No problem. So that's our electrical box back in place. Our burner back in place. Then you can just take your electrical cover, like so. No, stop. What you should do is, now we're going to hook up our wiring before we put our electrical box cover on. So, I'm going to take, and it's pretty well plug and play, guys. You've got a 6-prong connector here. It can only go one place on the board. Okay? And if you try to put it on backwards, it won't fit. So in this case, you turn it, and the clip goes this way, put it on, and it clicks right in place and held there. This little blue wire, by the way, ignore it. It serves no purpose. It's a diagnostic wire. We don't need to worry about it. So there's our 6-prong connector. And here comes our other 2-prong connector, which we're going to plug right in beside that. Click, it clicks right into place. Then we're going to sort of finesse these little wires over to the side here, out of our way, allowing the box cover, when we put it in place, to go on without bothering these wires. This other set of wires is going to come down. We're going to put it along the side here as well. And what you do is just sort of, you can do whatever. Ball up the extra wiring, sort of get it out of the way for yourself. And I happen to remember that the first red wire goes on the first terminal. The other red wire, and you can't mix these up, doesn't matter, put it on the second terminal. Boom. Then you'll have your ground wire we talked about earlier. You're going to reach over here. You're going to put your ground wire back on the ground terminal and tighten it up with the little nut that's on there, 7mm nut. So once that wiring is done there, then you're going to take your electrical element wiring, fish it underneath the piping of the cooling unit, and bring it over, and there's 2 other terminals. That connector, by the way, just happened to fall off, but we're demonstrating here. You're going to take the 2 wires, and you can't mix them up, either terminal. But there's 2 terminals left. You're going to plug in 1 wire to one terminal and 1 wire to the other terminal. Then you can put your box cover back on. You know, have you ever heard of Murphy's Law? A moment earlier, I was trying to put this connector on the Ford, and the connector came off. Don't worry about that. Things happen. You're just going to go to the hardware store. They sell wireless connectors, solderless connectors. I've got one here. I'm just going to place the wire back on the connector. and I'm going to take my crimping tool and I'm going to squeeze and crimp it back in its position, in its place, like so. And end of problem. Take the wire and rehook it onto our board. And end of story. And now, we're going to take our cover. We're going to put our cover back over the board. Put it back in place. It snaps down in place. There's one screw on top here. You'll take your screw and you're going to fasten the board back down in place. Now, a few other little tips I want to mention to you. Your burner. Your propane comes through a little orifice, this brass orifice right here, shoots the propane into this burner assembly to give you a burner flame, propane flame. I want you to clean this area. You take a 10mm wrench, put it on the orifice, and crack it free, and you're going to unscrew this orifice. It's just a little brass orifice. Just unscrew it with your fingers, and you're going to take it out. And then what you're going to do is you can soak that in some alcohol, rubbing alcohol of any kind, and then when it's soaking for a few minutes, blow through it with your mouth so it's clean. There's a little hole there. You're going to clean that out, and you're going to screw it back into place. At the same time, you're going to blow out this little tube here, the burner tube. Make sure there's no debris or dust in this burner tube, because you want to have a good flame when you light up the fridge again. Now, we only have a few more steps here and we're done this job. We're going to replace our foot screws, like so, to keep these back in their place, because we put them to one side to make things easier for us. So they're back in place. We're going to come over here now and we're going to check. And where you tie wrap, it's your choice. Just tie wrap this wiring harness someplace that you can find that's there. You put one over here. Don't get fussy on the location of this. You just don't want this wire harness flopping around. Take your little side cutters and snap off your excess here. Okay? That way the wiring's not hanging beyond the fridge. You might want to take a tie wrap and tie wrap some of these wires together here so they're in a more neat position for you. And now we're ready to stand our fridge up and finish the inside of the fridge, and we're done. Now, I've stood the fridge back up because we're done in the back of the fridge for now. We're going to open up our freezer door, and we're going to see the holes that we removed bolts from previously. You're going to be given some new bolts and washers in the kit with the cooling unit. I want you to look and put them in. Now, that one lines up perfectly. If by chance it didn't line up perfectly, don't worry about that. The hole is going to be just slightly to the left, slightly to the right, or up or down. It won't be far away from lining up. So if you're not sure if it's lined up, just take a rod or a piece of wire and feel in there to see if the hole is lined up to that hole. And you can see if it is. So that one lined up perfectly. This one here, look, it's almost perfect. It was a little bit to the left. Don't worry about it. Line them up, shove them in, tighten them all down. What I like to do is I'll start on the bottom right and I'll tighten that one in. And they just snug them in. Don't wrench them in hard, just snug them in good. Then after I do the bottom right, I like to come up with the bottom left or top left. Snug it in down. So if you get that one snugged and that one, the others are going to find their place and line right up. Tighten them all down and you're done in the freezer section. We've done the top end of the fridge freezer compartment. Now, remember, we have 5 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts here to reinstall there. So what I do is I take my trusty needle nose, because it's hard to get in there, and I get the bolt lined up, and I get it started in the hole, and you frig with it a little bit. And anyway, you screw those all in tight, snug like you did up top. Get all those bolts that are there snugged up. Then you take your temperature probe and slide it back on your fins, on the end fin there, about middle height of the fin. Then you're going to install the shelf the same way as we took it out. And then that's done in there. You're going to close the door and you're going to reinstall your handles, the 2 screws to reinstall the handles. Close it up. And at this point, that is the job is done. You've got everything done. And in a minute I'll tell you about some precautions to watch at the back of the fridge when you're hooking it back in. So now guys, probably the last thing you're going to do now is you want to bring your fridge back out into your motorhome or your trailer. Once you bring it back and you get it installed in the hole of the trailer or motorhome and get your fascia screws all back in place and bolted down, you'll come to the back of the fridge outside the motorhome, and you've got your two 12-volt wires that have to go into your block here. Make sure you get the polarity right. Make sure you've got negative where the negative goes, positive where the positive goes. They're usually marked on this little plate. When you have the live positive wire in your hand from your motorhome or trailer, don't touch a piece of metal with that wire, because if you did, it'll blow a fuse in the trailer or motorhome, and you'll have to go and replace that fuse if you've blown it. So when you've got your live wire hooking it back to your fridge, be careful to not short it out against a pipe or a wire. Then when you reinstall your propane line, make sure that you get that on straight and you're able to thread it on by hand, so you know you're not cross-threading this fitting. And then make sure you use your adjustable wrenches, snug it down good and tight, and make sure you soap up that joint with the propane on, looking for any bubbles. And if you see any bubbles, that means a leak. So always check this fitting area with soapy water that you have no propane leaks. And then light up your fridge and enjoy the new fridge performance you have. Congratulations. You have now successfully installed your brand new Arctic Cold cooling system, and your RV fridge is working like new. Be sure to give the refrigerator 6 to 8 hours to reach normal operating temperature. This product comes with a full lifetime warranty. If you require any assistance on the installation of the fridge or anything concerning your refrigerator, please don't hesitate to call our toll-free number 888-762-6665. It's 7 days a week, 9 to 9. And thank you very much for your business.